presentation to send to you earlier, kind of explaining the different systems, how they interact with different areas of the college, and also how they interact with the marketing area. So our CRM systems manage interactions with students and stakeholders.
Phil, sorry to interrupt you. If you can hear me, I can see your mouth moving, but I can't hear you. I'm not sure if something's muted in the room that we can't hear you on the Zoom.
Okay.
I think they're working to address that.
We're looking into it now.
Thanks.
Bill, can you test?
Yeah, test, microphone test.
I can hear Phil now. Yeah.
Okay.
I
Thank
can
you.
hear you.
Go ahead. We're good.
Okay, good to go. So our CRM systems, customer relationship management systems, manage interactions with students and stakeholders. Different departments use the CRMs tailored to their specific needs. The student recruitment area, which is a fairly new area of the college, uses its own CRM for guiding prospective students from initial inquiry all the way through a completed application. Student affairs, on the other hand, uses their own customer relationship management system called Starfish for their advising systems for current students to send early alerts, schedule advising appointments, and do overall case management with our students. Okay, I might be going the wrong way here. Great. So there was a question about the difference between a CRM and what marketing does. And while they both are important to the recruitment pipeline to generate enrollment for the college, marketing creates awareness and generates leads. That's their job, and I'm going to go into that in a moment. A CRM then takes those leads and tracks and nurtures those leads from the application process, through the application process, from initial inquiry all the way to a completed application. So, the marketing starts first, generating the leads, getting brand awareness out there on the to the market. Excuse me, to the market. And then once we get those leads through either a phone call, an email, someone fills out an inquiry form, then all of that goes into the CRM, and then that CRM, the people in our student recruitment area, then take those leads and then nurtures them through the application process. So how does our marketing generate our leads? And you might know this, but it's good just to have a quick refresher. We use a lot of different channels for marketing, and that's because our advertising environment is so complex. We do ads in digital form. Those are digital ads. Ads when you do a Google search called search engine optimization. We do ads on social media, video streaming platforms like when you go to YouTube or do a pre-roll before a show on Netflix. We do that in a digital way. We also do traditional ads. This is good for our older audience as well as parents. That's TV, radio, bus ads that you've seen. We send direct mail. And then we also do in-person outreach, community events, in-school visits. Those are mostly for, while we do collect names, it's really good branding for us. The great thing about digital ads is that we can track them, which is great. We do a lot of tracking, and we track them every single week. We do digital ads that you see on a website, impressions, a click-through rate, so that when someone sees an ad and clicks, we know, what they clicked to and where they clicked from. And then we do conversion rate and cost per conversion. That is, we take that rate, how much we paid for that ad, and if it was cost effective or not. Traditional advertising is a little bit more difficult to try to get an return on investment from. They do it from reach, impressions, ratings, frequency, but generally traditional type ads where you don't have that immediate feedback, we don't have good ROI on that. So we use that mostly for branding and brand awareness purposes. And then in person, we track if we collect names, handing out pieces of information. Again, a lot of that is branding and not as good for tracking actual ROI on events. So when we get all of these events, they're all fed into a CRM, a customer relationship management system. That CRM tracks the leads, it automates the follow-ups, it alerts our recruiters, they need to call, they need to follow up, it tracks their interaction all the way through so we can continue to follow up with them, do outreach to them, hopefully until they enroll. So our recruiters monitor when someone fills out an application. If they don't complete their application, our recruiters follow up, ask them if they have questions, need help, need to get documents in, have issues with payments, maybe need to talk to an advisor or a financial aid person. So, in this environment, every single lead is precious. So when we get an inquiry, when someone starts an application and doesn't finish it, we need to be on it, we need to follow up on it because they've already raised their hand that they want to attend the college. But as we know, our demographic especially needs probably a little bit more outreach, a little more encouragement than maybe, a university student that has, parents on their, helping them, family members helping them, counselors helping them. They've known that they've wanted to go to a university for some time. A lot of our students are not that way. And so we have to be aggressive, just like the for-profits are, in nurturing all of the leads that we get. So a CRM is really important in doing that. It supports timely, personalized engagement. I know we live in a digital age, but I cannot tell you how many times the recruiters tell us that, they reach out to someone and the first thing they say is, "Oh, I'm glad you called." You just don't get that kind of engagement in the digital world, and that's really important for our students. And our student recruitment team does a great job of reaching out with that personalized touch and having a conversation with them. So here's just some numbers since we implemented a customer relationship management system 2 years ago. It's generated about 19,000 leads. We've had about 4,000 conversion, and we've made 75,000 calls or emails. Now, a lot of students come to us without ever filling out an RFI form, without ever making a phone call. They simply just go to our website, hit apply now, and they're on their way. So a lot of leads don't come to us through our CRM. We want to try to change that because we think if they come to us first, before they even start filling out an application, chances are we can walk them through the application, we can answer their questions, they won't get frustrated and leave the application. Again, every single lead is precious to us, so we hope to change that, but it will never change that. Some students will just bypass, our enrollment CRM and just apply and, be a student and go forward and go right to a student advisor and register. All right, let me turn it over to Isaac, and he can walk you through sort of the history of our customer relationship management systems here at the college, including Enrollment RX.
Great. Thanks, Phil. Good evening. Apologize for not being there in person. I'm currently at an event in San Antonio, Texas, so it's evening here. But I want to give a quick history over the history of where we were, where we are today, and where we plan to go with CRM. So the college initially got into this space in 2015 through an RFP. If you can share the slides again, that'll be helpful for me to see them. But in 2015, the college got through an RFP, entered into an engagement with Enrollment RX. I want to be clear, at the time we got into Enrollment RX, this was solely for the student application. Enrollment RX sits on top of Salesforce. It's no secret, Salesforce is a leading CRM out in industry, but the intent was never to get into Salesforce for CRM capability. It could be viewed solely as the database, if you will, behind the student application. So a student would apply to the college and all the data would reside in Salesforce. Some of that passed on to Banner. When Phil came to the college in 2022, Phil quickly recognized that as a college at the time, we really needed to be leveraging a CRM to track marketing leads and really take us to that next level. We had a conversation about kind of what would our future strategy be with Enrollment RX, what could we do to get them up and running quickly. At that time, we were pretty confident that going forward at the end of the Enrollment RX contract, that we were most likely going to pivot in a different direction, as there were many more competitors in the space and products that were excelling and doing things that more aligned with where we wanted to go as an institution. And so, from a dollar standpoint and from a quick ability to get up and running quickly, the decision was made to go with Enrollment RX recruitment module. So just like we have the student application module that sat on top of Salesforce, we then procured the recruitment module that likewise sat on top of Salesforce. And what it allowed Phil's team to do is quickly get up leveraging the marketing capabilities for the CRM. True, we could have just stayed with Salesforce, hired developers, built something custom. Obviously, custom comes with much more expense, much more personnel overhead. And so that was where there was a deliberate decision to go with the recruitment module, knowing that that was going to align with the end of our contract and be a short-term solution. So that in May 2023, that went up and live. Phil gave you the metrics that where we've seen the return of investment on that today. In June 2024, that was expanded from workforce to leverage as well. Next slide, please. So that's where we were, right? And I talked about, it was a conscious decision to move away from Enrollment RX, given where they were as a company and where there were emerging leaders in the space. And so as a college, we collectively looked at the landscape. In a perfect world, we were looking for a CRM that was going to cover both sides of the spectrum. So there's the, prospective student to applicant, and then there is the advising side, which is also often referred to as a CRM, and I'll talk about that next. But that to cover that space for the life of while the student's with us. Though we saw products that claimed they could cover end to end, there was no product that was truly going to meet the college's needs from an end-to-end platform. I think about 5 years. Within 5 years, this product, Element 451, potentially, as well as the new advising platform that will be coming to the board with in May. I think they'll cross over because they're both starting to work in each other's space. I think, in the next 5 years, we will be able to standardize on a single platform, but that just wasn't feasible today. And so in October 2024, we went to the board and got approval to move forward with Element 451 as the new student application and CRM on the recruitment front. There's a lot of really, really nice, exciting functionality that this product offers that's going to bring to the college. At the event I'm at yesterday, I was talking to colleagues here from community colleges across the country that this was an exciting project we were working on, and 3 of them came up to me and said this has been a game changer for their institution. Put me in contact with people at their college, but they all raved about how much Element 451 has been impactful to their institution. What I failed to bring to the board in October was the fact that though we were signing a contract in October, we were delaying payment as well as delaying implementation until January. And so though we signed the contract back in October, we did not start work on Element 451 until January of this year, when the registrar's office and others had freed up capacity. And likewise, we didn't pay for it until we kicked off that project. And so I'll apologize and take ownership for not making that clear in the board report back in October. So this product, we kicked that off. It's going very well. Work is currently being done on RFI, so the request for information forms that generate leads through our website, as well as the student application. The plan currently is to go live with the lead tracking in early fall and be ready for the application probably mid-fall at the latest. The registrar's office, as well as Phil's recruitment team, is really leveraging an opportunity not to shoehorn what we've done over the past 10 plus years into the current application, but really make sure that we are bringing best practice and an ease of use for the application for the students going forward. It is no secret that there's been a complaint about the application and its level of complexity. And so we're making sure that we're intentional about how we redesign that process to make a much better front door experience for students into the college. And then there's also, when do you cut over? And that's always a challenge, especially within the academic semester. And so this is the current timeline for Element 451. And like I said, as to date, project is on plan, on schedule, and things are going very well. Next slide. So then there's the back half, right? Once a student is admitted to the college, once they enroll and start taking courses, how do we manage them to ensure their success? And this is the advising system. But the advising system is often called a CRM, customer relationship management system. We are managing the relationship with that active student throughout their journey with us as an institution. But this is the platform that takes information from our learning management system, D2L, takes information from faculty, attendance, all that information that's going on in the academic space, and raises the flag if there's, hey, student is not attending class, student is not doing well. It's that more proactive advising, so we can get ahead of a student before they walk away from us for not having their level of success. And so, in this space, we were not, like I said, we weren't able to find a platform that did both the recruitment side and the life cycle of the student with us well. Starfish is the system we currently have today. We've been with Starfish since 2017. Starfish has been acquired at least once, if not twice. Today, they're owned by EA Global. EA Global's flagship product is not Starfish. It's what's referred to as Navigate. So we've seen Starfish really fall behind market leaders in terms of what they're offering, their innovation, and how they're maximizing that platform. And so, as I mentioned earlier, we'll be coming to the board in May with a replacement for Starfish. We're excited for the vendor we're bringing forward. They are making some waves in the space and really are going to allow us to do a lot more. One of the other things I want to make clear, because there aren't any slides on this, but one thing we do in IT over the last 2.5 years, we put a lot of time and effort into overhauling our project management processes. The first year we focused on project intake and prioritization. How do we ensure that IT is working on the best projects for the college? And I want to make that clear. The metrics we use to determine prioritization are not IT metrics, right? These are things that will help move the college forward based on our strategic initiatives. So year one, we really focus on how do we ensure we're saying yes to the right things, no to the right things. Year two, we focused on how do we actually now mature our project management processes to run a project. How are we ensuring we're holistically looking at projects and across the college landscape to ensure we're maximizing our investments, we're not duplicating efforts. So in alignment with that was our application portfolio initiative. And that was really taking our enterprise systems, mapping them to core capabilities, and seeing where we had levels of duplication. I'm proud that with the 90 plus applications we have on the enterprise side, there's not much duplication. The areas of duplication, really where we find the heaviest duplication are on the assessment side. So we have like a Spanish assessment, English placement, though, then that area is where we have some overlap. But in core areas like this, we do not have a lot of duplication. And so though we have duplication by name, our content, CRM, we don't have duplication from a business capability standpoint. And one of the things that, you know, we check to see when we bring on a new system, is it going to duplicate capabilities? And if so, what can we do about that? And so that you'll see that in the board report for the student advising system that's coming, you know, to you all next month. There are some areas where we are going to be able to eliminate some existing systems because the system we're bringing on board covers some core capabilities that we have today. And before we brought that forward as, you know, hey, this would be nice to replace, you know, I worked with Irene and her team to really determine, are these systems we can go after to replace? And they are confident, absolutely. There are 3 key systems in addition to this CRM that we're going to be able to reduce. So reduce spend, reduce tech sprawl, and really continue to concentrate our efforts on managing a healthy portfolio. Next slide, please. So rounding out CRM, we want to be transparent about the spend because it is big spend. But I wanted you to know that we are mindful of the dollars that we spend. So since 2015 through 2026, the cost for Enrollment RX and Salesforce has been $1.1 million. I'm going to jump to the bottom real quick. The cost for Starfish since 2017, $1.5 million. The contract that we went to for Element 451, which will replace Enrollment RX and Salesforce, is $190,000 annually. So the annual spend, if you're looking, you know, apples to apples between Enrollment RX and Salesforce, is going to be a little higher on an annual basis. However, the functionality, the capabilities, the level of AI integrations that really should allow Phil's team to be able to pivot and do some things in a much quicker capability, you know, offset those costs. Element 451 is also maintaining the integrations with Banner, our student information system. The person who maintained those integrations in Enrollment RX and Salesforce left the college some time ago, and that's a position we haven't filled. So if you actually talk, you know, save dollars from positions, efficiency gains, we're actually in a positive moving to Element 451. And I think that's the last slide, if I'm not mistaken. Yep. And with that, Phil and I would be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you both. Any questions from anyone on the board?
I have a quick question. You mentioned that we're looking for a replacement for Starfish. Do we have a timeline for when that would happen or when we anticipate switching?
Yes, Board Member Barraza, the current contract for Starfish ends in November 2025. So our plan is to be up and live with a new system before November 2025. We do not want to have to kick that can down the road another year.
Thank you.
And we are confident that based on going to the board, if we get approval, starting that off, we will be able to make that deadline.
All right. Other questions, Board Member Barraza or anybody else?
Excuse me. So I guess my questions are, there's never been a misunderstanding between marketing and the CRM. So I just want to state that up front. In our new member board meeting in January, somebody asked if we were using a CRM, and in that meeting we were told we don't have one. And the reason that caused me concern was because I remembered somebody in a board meeting, I thought it was January of 2023, but it was actually March of 2023, asking, and it's there, everybody can look at it if they want, but we were told that there was a CRM. And so I don't want to beat a dead horse, but it just seems like there's a lot of things that are inconsistent with what we were told back then And I mean, I know we possibly were told that because we wanted to get that motion passed and move through. But we were told that there was a CRM, so that was whenever, and it would be up and running, fully functioning by fall of 2023. I just Googled it while we were talking, and, there's some document on our website from October 2016, and one of the questions on this was, does MAP, capital M-A-P, which I guess is some marketing automation platform that we were using, integrate with other systems other than the CRM? So this is in 2016, and according to that document, it looks like there is a CRM. So all I'm saying is, I don't want to spend my time and energy trying to understand what's going on here. I just want it to be more consistent and more exact. When we are told something, it shouldn't cause somebody who's been around for 2 years or 5 years or 10 years to say, hey, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't coordinate with what we were told before. By the way, and the answer in the document to that, does it integrate with other systems other than the CRM? The answer was yes, it integrates with Enrollment RX. So those are the kind of things that cause me grief, right? When we're told something, but then when I do literally 8 seconds of searching, I find something that doesn't corroborate with that. So thank you for the information about us not purchasing those when we approved them in October of last year, because the 2 CRMs, that it was 2 different, and Isaac said that we didn't actually purchase them at that point, because that was also one of my concerns, that if we purchased those back in October and they weren't up and running when we were talking about it in January, that was another one of my concerns. I'm not completely satisfied with any of this, but I'm going to not spend my time and energy looking into it anymore, because I think that you all know that we're concerned about it being efficient, accurate, and that the governing board should be told when things do go into effect or don't go into effect on things that we have approved. I think that that's just one more cog in the cycle, that it would make it come full circle, and we would be distinctly aware of things happening that we are voting on. Thank you.
Yeah, just a quick response to that. So in that January meeting for board orientation, what I said was that the college did not have a CRM prior to me coming to the college. And that's important, because I was an interim in 2021, but I was officially a vice chancellor for external relations in 2022. Hence, from the timeline in the report, as soon as I was hired full-time, one of the first things I did was to extend and buy that module for Enrollment RX to get the new student recruitment team up and running on a CRM. The college, prior to my coming here, did not have a CRM that was being used for student recruitment. It had a Salesforce and Enrollment RX, but that was just to fill out the application. So at the board meeting, and this is really important, I think, from a marketing perspective, we need to automate our marketing processes. We need every single lead to come in and be followed up on, and the people who follow up on them be accountable for doing that. That was not happening prior to 2022. So when I said the college had no CRM for student recruitment in 2022, we truly did not. No, following up leads was rather haphazard, and I think a lot of the success that we've had in the last couple of years, as far as enrollment growth, has been because we're more intentional in following up on all of our leads. Now that we have a CRM that admittedly was not perfect, I think Element 451 will be better, but we are following up on leads much more intentionally now.
All right, any other questions or comments about the CRM systems? No, not hearing any. Let's move to 2.2 then. Presentation on the Comprehensive Integrated Energy Management Program. Dr. B, are you leading this one?
Good afternoon, Chairperson Taylor, members of the board, Chancellor Nassy, colleagues and guests. It's my pleasure tonight to kick off the presentation, so I'm not going to take the whole thing. I'm just going to give the beginning stages of the presentation, updating the board on the status of the Comprehensive Integrated Energy Management Program. So this project has been a major college project beginning about 6 years ago. So it's been a long time, and it's a really significant project. I noted that Jeff Sylvan just rolled his eyes, that it has been 6 years, because it has been a long 6 years of this project. In terms of, let me see if, do you guys see the presentation down there? Thank you. So tonight, I'm going to tick off the beginning of it. I'm going to talk a little bit about the background and the history and the need. Then I'm going to turn it over to our acting AVC for facilities, Benny Sanchez, and then he's going to turn it over to David Clark. They're going to talk more about the implementation, where the project's at now, and the next steps, sort of showcasing where we're at and what the capabilities of the system currently are. So in terms of the history, the college at the time had built a bunch of facilities, built a bunch of buildings, and incrementally over time had updated some of its HVAC systems, some of its lighting, but it hadn't been done in a comprehensive, coordinated way. As a result, there were a lot of operational challenges within our system and the infrastructure. So for example, different buildings had different specialized systems for systems controls. There was outdated technology that ranged all the way back to the 1990s. As such, the systems couldn't talk to each other, so you would have, if there was an issue happening at one of the campuses, an HVAC tech would have to come on to the campus, identify what the specific equipment was, what the system that was in control of that, couldn't diagnose this from afar, couldn't do anything through the system, through system tools that now are integrated, and would have to basically troubleshoot on site. In addition, there were all inconsistencies with how these systems were handling temperature controls, that sort of thing. In addition to that, it was becoming increasingly difficult to replace the failing equipment. And we gave some examples at the time that literally, in order to keep some of the systems operational, some of the controls that we needed, we were having to source them on eBay, used, because they were that outdated. We were also at risk of some of the ongoing system software was not being updated and carried forward by the supplier, so we were at risk of some actual system failures as a whole. So the idea was, we have these big problems. We don't have systems that are efficient. We're not using efficient lighting, for example, and we're spending more money than necessary on utilities, electricity, and natural gas consumption in particular. So the idea at the time was twofold: go out and find a way to replace and develop an integrated system, find a vendor who could do that, and then in addition to that, take advantage of the fact that we now have an integrated system coming online to the college and fold it into the educational capabilities for our students. So developing what's called a living learning lab, so that we could actually provide some of the information available through our own equipment and use it to train students in our building and construction technology program and our HVAC program. So the idea is sort of the best of all worlds, have state-of-the-art systems, improve our consumption, our energy consumption, be able to better manage and maintain our own equipment, knowing that when you have the proper data analytics involved in the equipment, we can diagnose when equipment might be starting to fail, and identifying that, and that we need to replace that equipment before it's actually at a failed state. Going back and hitting the last of this particular slide, we issued an RFP in October of 2019 to identify a vendor who could do all of these different things that we had identified, and that was awarded to Trane. Train then came on, kicked off the project by initially assessing where we were at, going through comprehensively doing a comprehensive audit of our systems, controls, energy savings opportunities that we might be able to take advantage of, and then put together a proposed list of projects that they would recommend that we put in place. That was then awarded or approved by the board late 2020, and that kicks off what we're now going to, what Benny's going to sort of update you on from the 2020 point to now what has happened, because we are just about finished with that project and finally commissioning the project at the conclusion of all of that work. See if there's anything I missed. I think I hit all of those different things. Part of it was we had fluorescent lighting throughout the district. It's not to say that there wasn't some LED lighting, but it was very limited in its use. The idea was implement LED lighting throughout the college, as well as replacing and having LED lighting, which is far more reliable, doesn't need to be replaced as often. So it also has an impact on the management, from having to manage with the staffing resources in terms of how often you have to replace the equipment and so forth. And then adding in central plant submetering. I'm going to again say that these were the objectives of the program. Now I'm going to turn it over to Benny, again, our acting AVC for facilities, to sort of update you on how that project has come together over time. And we will leave some time at the end for questions, and I'll be able to come back if you have questions of me.
Good afternoon, Chair Taylor and board members and Chancellor Nassy. I'll be taking you through the next few slides. We're going to cover the scope of work for the project. I'm going to land on a couple items. We're going to talk about the budget, the schedule, as Dr. B mentioned, lighting standards that were improved, along with our equipment automation systems and our physical equipment with our HVAC equipment, as well as our system commissioning, which really brings the project to a close. So the project included an area of 1.5 million square feet that was taken through planning and evaluation with Train. Not covered in that square foot area are campuses and areas not owned by the college. So those would be our 29th Street Coalition Center, El Rio and El Pueblo Learning Centers, as well as our Davis-Monthan and our prison locations, as well as our Green Valley site as well. The project budget was set at $14.2 million. That covered construction as well as contingency in that cost. In May of 2022, a notice to proceed was issued with the planned substantial completion date of April of 2024. There was an impact to the substantial completion date, setting it from April of 2024 to April of 2025. Later in the presentation, we'll go into a slide that breaks out the financial details into a table for everyone. The first evaluation, as Dr. B mentioned, was our lighting standards. This was a major conservation measure because we retrofitted over 14,500 lighting fixtures throughout our campus locations. We went to LED technology, which consumes up to 75% less energy than our typical traditional fluorescent fixtures. These fixtures, LED fixtures, also have a significantly extended life to our fluorescent lamp fixtures, with our LED fixtures lasting between 25,000 to 50,000 hours in comparison to 7,000 to 10,000 hours with our fluorescent lamps. This offered us some substantial reduction in maintenance workload, with us seeing a 30% to 80% reduction in those areas, but they were also tied to the size of the specific sites where we're providing the service. With this change, we also removed lighting elements that pose an environmental risk. Some of our ballasts may contain mercury and BCPs, so that was a significant improvement in aligning with the health of our campuses. Part of this effort, we also standardized our LED temperatures in colors to ensure we're supporting compliance and safety and comfort in moving in this direction. For our exterior spaces, we landed at 3,000 Kelvin lighting output, which means what the fixture is throwing out. And we set this number to ensure that we're going to be in compliance with regulatory agencies, but also in support of our dark sky compliant efforts supported here in the region. For our interior spaces, we're looking at a lighting output of 4,000 Kelvin units, which provides a bright but neutral light, and it's ideal for learning and working spaces. As Dr. B mentioned, the college had started this retrofit effort, but due to limiting capacity with our staffing levels in our trades team, this contract allowed for a more efficient and cohesive completion of this effort. This slide here is talking a little bit about what Dr. B mentioned about some of our automation system was so outdated that it was tough to find replacements, or they just weren't being manufactured. Some of our components were dating back all the way to the 90s. While it served its purpose, technology was advancing. And to bring our facilities into the 21st century to ensure we're being smart with our energy use, along with sustainability facilities management, we strategically invested in the modernization of 1,200 controllers for our campuses, along with integrating 338 new controllers from recent capital projects that had been completed. To explain what our BSA is, it's constantly monitoring the interior environment of our workspaces 24 hours a day, and we can make those adjustments to address, ensure comfort and efficiency, but also knowing that the BSA is a bottleneck for achieving sustainable goals and providing an optimal environment. The strategic investment to modernize us gave us a new BSA system, and that system is called Tracer Ensemble. And the key benefits are improved operational efficiencies, reduced energy consumption, and most importantly, it's scalable and future ready, which means that it can meet our demands as we evolve as facilities, and it helps us meet our sustainable goals. And continuing, we also had HVAC equipment that was in need of replacement. With it being an ongoing project, we had equipment at our east, west, and downtown campuses, which required large cooling devices to be serviced or refurbished. All of that effort was run through as this whole project was going on to ensure that we were going to be able to land on those facilities improvements as we were going through the timeline of the project. As Dr. B shared, we also installed central plant submetering. This is a benefit because it gives us real-time energy use that helps us with better budget allocation, cost allocation, and also smart energy decisions as we operate our systems. Another significant improvement to our sites where we installed these units, which are called adjustable frequency drives. We have two significantly sized units at our west campus, both of them at 9-ton each for capacity. And these drives allow them to run as fast as they need to when needed, which supports the reduction in wear and tear on these units and allows them to have a bit longer life while they're in operation. So as I mentioned earlier in the first slide when I was talking about project scope, we initially had a substantial completion date set for April of 2024. And the kick in that was we extended it through change orders to additional work that was discovered, which also moved our substantial completion for April of 2025. One thing to remember is that we had mechanical systems that were anywhere between 20 to 50 years of age. So discovering those at a project of this scale is going to happen. Identifying some of our deferred maintenance, we also had HVA deficiencies that were identified at a total of 447 deficiencies that had to be addressed as well to bring up all of our units ready and capable to meet this integration that we were moving towards. Part of those repairs were handled through change orders and used contingency funds. However, we did use in-house staff to capture some of these repairs, which we then had a cost savings of $750,000 by utilizing our internal teams to also catch up on some of these items that were coming through as change orders. But at that time, we also had concurrent HVAC improvement projects going on as well. At our East Campus, at 2 of our buildings, we installed VRV systems. They're variable refrigeration volume. It's equipment. The best way I can describe it is, if you guys are familiar with the little mini split systems that are readily available, that's what it's like, but at a much larger scale. But basically, it's providing that service to our units. At our East Campus, we replaced heavy energy consumption units with fan coils with these systems, which are far more efficient. We had 39 VRV controllers, so that's that back end of the system that's helping us run and be more efficient. We installed those at our East Campus. During this time, we also had significant capital projects going on. Those capital projects incorporated through contract agreements with the general contractors. They were utilizing Delta controllers. So we have train controllers, we have Daikin controllers, and now we also have Delta controllers, all going on at the same time while we're in this program. At our downtown campus, for our Delta controllers, that put us at our new M building, our transportation building. At our West Campus, most recently completed is our H&J, our health professions projects, as well as our Building F, our science building. They're all running on the Delta controllers, as well as our Aviation Technology Center, the recent expansion, also landing with Delta controllers as well. So in a summary, we had a total of Delta controllers added during the project, totaling 287. At the start of the project, we already had 300 in place, and including the Daikin controllers that we added at our East Campus, that put us at 629 new controllers that successfully integrated into our train ensemble platform. The real benefit of our this train ensemble platform is it allows us to use these different components, Daikin, Delta, and obviously train, but they still can feed into the ensemble platform and still allow the platform to work as we need it to. As Dr. B mentioned, there's a component to the agreement that has to do with an experience for our learners, and it's a living learning lab. It is going to be housed at our ST West building at our downtown campus. The ST West building right now is currently under renovation. So a great way to explain this is we're renovating ST West, and inside of that renovation, there's a small space dedicated, about 1,500 square feet, dedicated to this virtual learning lab that's going to be able to deliver a new set of skills and knowledge to our learners in there. With building automation, like I've mentioned several times, it's a high skill set that's now being utilized and had been utilized across many entities. Like ourselves now with this train ensemble program, we're highly vested into a BSA system, but so is the places like the U of A, Raytheon, and our Banner hospital systems. They're also use this system in their facilities management. In this slide, I'm going to go over the McKinstry report. So whenever you have a large-scale project and you're making significant improvements to your HVA systems, whether it's the actual systems themselves, you're replacing them or improving them, it's your controllers, it's all these very unique pieces that need to work together to ensure that what we said we wanted them to do, they're doing it. So it's very common that we incorporate the services of a third-party commissioning agent. For this project, we hired McKinstry to provide that for us. That effort began in 2023 when McKinstry started reviewing documents and verifying the scope of work. They conducted field inspections and validated the controls programming as well. They also participated in college training reviews and also facilitated issue resolution meetings with the vendor as well as college staff. Key discoveries during the commissioning report, they uncovered 313 total issues, and they were all categorized by priority. So for example, we had 54 low units, and those were ranging from mislabeling on equipment or devices. We had 235 at moderate, resulting in programming or system setting issues. And we had 24 rated at high, which were wiring issues and functionality concerns. The result of this commissioning effort was a 3,700-page detailed report guiding corrections as well as enhancements. Of those 313, we're now down to 3, and they're in progress of being finalized and completed. While McKinstry did provide this for us to get us to this point, there also is ongoing service that's going to happen for the college, where they're going to provide warranty reviews on outstanding items, and they're also going to be providing measurement and verification of our energy savings that are required per the contract. With us tonight is Mike Swift with McKinstry, so if needed to answer questions at the end of the presentation, he's here. With that, I'm going to pass the next run of slides over to David Clark, who is the director of our infrastructure here.
I just have one question
ma'am.
for you, if that's okay. Chair Taylor, I will not wait to be acknowledged.
Go ahead.
You were talking about the expected longevity of the outdoor LED lights earlier.
Correct.
I know that some older ones are experiencing. This isn't working.
Okay.
I'll just talk loud.
Yeah.
I'm from New York. Some of these LED lights were experiencing a manufacturing defect. The phosphor coating on them was degrading and turning some of them purple. Do we know if the ones that we installed will eventually do that, or are we not sure?
I have not seen any work orders come through yet, but I will ask David if he can help us with this. David has been the backbone of this program and been really in touch with Train and has the details on those specifics.
Okay, it wouldn't be for the HVAC, it's the
For the
LED
lighting.
lights. Yeah,
Yes.
and it usually takes a little bit for the heat and everything to degrade that coating. So I was just wondering if hopefully the ones that you purchased came after the defect was identified. But I'm not sure. It almost seems like it might be maybe on the tail end of that.
Randy, I'll definitely look into that and get an answer to you.
Thank you.
Yeah. And with that,
I
I'll
have a
pass it
question
over.
as
Yes,
well,
sir.
actually, before we move into the next section. If you were done, Board Member Randall, sorry, I don't mean to cut you off.
Yes.
All right, she was done. So going back to the mention you made of the deficiencies that were identified as we were going along, and I understand that stuff happens and you find things as you start taking stuff apart and all that, but the number you threw out there seemed like sort of a lot to me, and maybe it's not a lot, just in the scope of the size of the project. But I wonder if you could talk a little more about what some of those deficiencies were, whether they were more than you expected there to be, and maybe a little bit of the cause. Was it like a previous vendor that wasn't doing the maintenance they needed, or we weren't doing the deferred maintenance we needed, or what was the cause of some of those issues that you were identifying as you were going forward?
Chair Taylor, I'm going to defer that to David Clark, who was hands-on with this particular aspect of the project.
Good evening, Chair Taylor, Chancellor Nassi, the distinguished members of the board. In response to your question, this was a very extensive and complex project. So there were aspects of the digital controls. There were also aspects of the mechanical systems that were ranging between 50 and 20 years old. So anything that could have been a component that could have failed was identified. So when we're talking about thousands of controllers and we're talking about anywhere from a dozen to 20 to 30 points, control points per, the metrics can add up very, very quickly to get to those numbers. And as Benny had mentioned, there were different. Let me do this. There were actually different ratings of those. So with regard to if there was 2 digits that got transposed, that would be a legitimate issue that could be identified as such. So in answer to your question, based on the amount of everything that was working, the age of the systems, the fact that we were coming off of 3 control systems prior to, I don't believe that it was really in excess of what could be expected. There was also the items that were identified in-house. Those were largely I should say in-house and then by Trane as they were doing the implementation. And those were basically mechanical components that were required to function, that were to be reutilized with the new control system, and were found that they were broken, for a lack of a better description, that needed to be identified and replaced. And that's where Benny was speaking to the aspects of some of that was contracted through the contingency. Some of that was worked in-house. Our teams did an extraordinary job. There was a lot of weekend work. There was a lot of people coming in early, staying late to try and get as most value and continue the momentum of this project.
Thank you. I appreciate that context. And also thank you to your teams too. You know, we're always talking about using dollars efficiently. So your ability to leverage those internal resources when you could to make some of those repairs for the savings in the overall project and not exclusively rely on the vendors, although I'm sure they're very skilled to be able to do that. I appreciate that. I think it shows that you all are committed to finding efficiencies where you can. I just had one other question, and we can wait on it if you're going to answer it in a second. But my understanding, part of that McKinstry report was going to look at some of the savings that were originally promised in terms of more energy efficiency, less cost spent on our electric bill and all that. And I'm wondering what the conclusions of the report were about whether we're achieving the savings that we were expected to save, or is that still something that's ongoing in the analysis?
Oh, and that's actually the point that I was going to speak to next. If
great.
you'd like, I can address the slide, and then if there's questions, we can address those as they come.
Perfect. Go ahead.
Great. All right, so in looking at the financial information, as was mentioned earlier, the core scope of this project was $13,209,933, and that was including all of the energy conservation measures as well as the virtual living learning lab. So there was the contingency factor of $991,067, making the total approval amount $14.2 million, as had been discussed. Now, of the contingency amount, $791,747 has been utilized for project change orders. And as Benny had mentioned, they range from everything from repairing things that needed to be repaired in order to work with the systems to the integration of the new buildings that were coming along as well, so that everything had the common front end. So what was established in the contract was that Trane has provided a guarantee energy savings of $13,150,241, and that's based on a 15-year cumulative amount. So the breakdown of that on the monthly, or I'm sorry, on the annual, would be $760,419 for the first year, and basically the increase would be at about a 2% annual based on projected increase of utilities on that. And this is all going to be off of the energy savings that were guaranteed by Trane when they did the calculations for this project. So for electricity, that's going to show an annual savings of 6,732,761 kilowatt hours and 113,142 therms of natural gas. So combined, that is going to be a reduction of 4,478 metric tons of CO2 equivalent, which is how they measure these things. And when I was working with our sustainability director on that, he said it was basically equivalent to 500, the energy consumption for 500 Tucson homes, or not burning 26 train cars of coal, or not burning 5 million gallons of gasoline, for a little bit of perspective on that with regard to the efforts that are being made towards the environmental sustainability goals of the college. So the numbers with the savings definitely have that aspect going with them. Now, with the McKinstry engagement, they are basically going to be doing a validation of the measurement and verification of what Train has promised. That's what we've contracted with them for. So Train also did, they did energy rebates with all of the changes that were happening with the lighting and controls for conservation of energy. Tucson Electric Power, our provider, has partnered with various agencies that can work on what are potential rebate opportunities. And the college has been paid $1,002,579 for the scope of the project. Let's see. And our total expenditure with McKinstry for doing the commissioning, as well as doing warranty verification, as well as the measurement and verification validation, is $631,052. So hopefully that explains what McKinstry's engagement is with regard to the guaranteed savings and how that all works. Okay. All right, so steps moving forward. As was mentioned, we are at substantial completion, and there were 23 components of the contract. Each one had its own substantial completion. They've all been signed off. So that's going to lead to final acceptance of the contract. Final acceptance will be Train has done what the contract has reflected, and we can then release their final payment and performance retention. That will be $1,446,535 going forward on that. Now, with regard to what was asked earlier, with regard to the equipment, we can get into the warranty period, which is going to be 10 years in parts for the LED lighting. So we've not, and I will state that all of the equipment that was installed was contemporary, so there's been nothing identified thus far as having any type of manufacturing defect, but that is obviously something that we'll be certainly engaged with, and we do have that 10-year warranty period for the exchange on that. Our BAS systems, that's going to be 1 year. For parts and labor on that. And then the HVAC system will also be 1 year parts and labor on that. As was mentioned, our measurement and verification is going to begin at final acceptance as well. So that's going to be the jumping off point for several aspects of the contract. Now, outside of the warranty period, there's going to be additional work that we'll be requiring support on, and this is more of an ongoing of things that were discovered along the way due to the various vintage and the different equipment that we have. Everything was able to be integrated in and was operational, but there are mechanical components that just out of attrition are going to continue to require replacement. There'll be aspects of that as well where we're going to be requiring ongoing support in working with the product. So we're going to be getting into a what's referred to as an intelligent services agreement with Train. That's also going to be covering the aspects of the subscription, the updates of the software, a lot of the operational components. We'll have a 24/7, 365 offsite support for everything on the digital side with this intelligent services agreement, as well as priority availability from their service team for the things that need to be hands-on going forward with that. And then moving forward, we'll continue building on the established infrastructure of the system. As was mentioned, this is an open source protocol. It uses an ASHRAE and ANSI standard called BACnet, which is basically all of HVAC equipment and controls can integrate on this particular platform. and also with what we have in place for doing our energy monitoring, the sub-meters that were put in for the central plant. We want to grow that to where we're doing sub-metering for all the buildings. We'll be setting up energy dashboards for those. We've already done some preliminary work in-house. There were some scheduled outages for some inspection, and our teams have already started putting in some of the equipment that will support that data coming through. And then with regard to the virtual living learning lab that Benny spoke of, that once that's completed and there's going to be the equipment that's actually there at ST West for the BCT program. They're also going to be able to use this same software doing a compartmentalized version called a digital twin, where they can actually look at all of these operations in real time and how the systems work together. Okay, so wanted to give a quick kind of show and tell before and after on the software and systems graphics. So one of our legacy systems was utilizing, this would be a site plan for our downtown campus. In our modern train ensemble, this is what it looks like now. When we had previous systems, even within them, there wouldn't be continuity. Here's an old floor plan that we had on one of the legacy systems, and it was for Building E6 at the East Campus. And here it is, modernized version and train ensemble. Now, you'll notice that there's some red and blue shading that's overlaid there. And what this will do is indicate if you have areas that are out of the set point thresholds. It will display that. So when you have your operator and they're going through their site and they're scanning, this will be a diagnostic where at a glance they can say, okay, I have 3 areas that require some attention to look into. Here's another legacy graphic. This is actually from the East Campus on the same system. So there was not even continuity from one building to the next. This one's slightly more detailed. It's reflecting some of the equipment on there. And here we have it in the modern version. So an example of, let's say, a piece of equipment. Here we have an air handler overlay on the old system, and here it is now. And just like there wasn't any continuity between the visuals and the graphics, there was also no continuity in nomenclature. You would have something that was referred to as a VAV, variable air volume box, which is used extensively throughout the college and most commercial applications. Some sites, they'd call it a VAV. There's some engineers that like to call it a TU, a terminal unit. So you would have one building, it's called this, another building, it's called something else. Same thing with data points. An SAT, a supply air temperature sensor. A DAT, a discharge air temperature sensor. It's the same thing, but it is referred to differently. Now, when you're bringing staff on board and you're training them, especially ones that don't have a background in digital controls, and you're saying, first off, well, here's 3 systems you need to learn, and within the systems, there's not any continuity, you can certainly see the value of having everything at this moment in time across the entire district, utilizing any user can see the same presentation, whether they are looking at the downtown campus, the Desert Vista campus, Aviation Technology Center, and know that equipment is going to be named consistently and data points are going to be continuous as well. And this will also be very valuable in that teaching component in the digital twin for the virtual lab. Here's a couple more of our 21st century, if you will, graphics for the East Campus and for the Aviation Technology Center. In phasing out these old systems, as Benny had kind of mentioned, we were utilizing platforms that were no longer supported from an operating system standpoint. They didn't do any updates past, say, Windows 7 or Server 2012. So this was forcing us to utilize technology that had vulnerabilities. And we worked very closely with the IT department in the entire implementation of this project from the very beginning to how it was going to roll out, how it was going to work with the networking, and it was a very positive collaborative experience. During this time, Networks was already working on a transition of systems to new virtual local area networks, and we were able to do this in concert where old systems were taken down while this transition was happening, and it was quite mutually advantageous. So there were 3 servers that were finally taken offline that they were ecstatic about because they were quite antiquated, and it's been very positive with the technology going forward. And I'd like to give a quick demonstration in real time of the Ensemble product. And I'm going to have to log in again. All right, and there we go. And I guess I'm going to have to drive this thing old school. So we're at district office, so let's go there. Let me mute that. All right, so here's our site view of district office. We'll come here to the C building where we're at presently. All right, and here we are in the conference room, a C105. We have 3 air conditioning units, numbers 12, 17, and 18 respectively overhead, that are currently, we've got 1 that's in operation, and we have 2 that the load hasn't called for yet. These are all programmed to work sequentially. Let's bring up unit 12 because that's the one that's running. And there it is. We've got a discharge air temperature of 77 degrees, which means that we're actually satisfied and it's not in a cooling mode right now. And we've got our blower fan is in operation, which you can probably all hear now anyways. So we'll also go back to, let's go up to the 2nd story. And this is a cloud-based system, which means all you need is internet. And whether you've got a smartphone, a tablet, or a PC, a laptop, whatever, you can get on. I actually got on one time while I was standing in line at Disneyland. So it's very easy to get into the system. It's very easy to utilize. Let's see, we'll go over here to conference room. And we'll show you what a VAV looks like. And the way that things are integrated, a Delta VAV is going to look like a train VAV. There's continuity and everything on that. And that might take a minute to load. We also have redundant systems in place if there's any ever issues with network site to site. There's also local PCs that we have hardlined into our network that will allow access into these controllers. Sometimes I don't have the most patience. There we go. So showing your airflow, what our status of heat is, which isn't any at this point, what our damper position is. And the experience is the same throughout the district. I could go on, but being in respect of everybody's time, were there more questions? Was there anything else that you'd like to see in the live demo?
I have 2 questions. When I used to teach at the East Campus, there were all sorts of temperature problems in the classrooms, and we would call up the Pima maintenance guys. There were a few women too, and we'd say, hey, can you check the temperature? And there was something that they could do remotely to make it more pleasant in the classrooms. So So my first question is, will faculty and staff in offices still have that ability to call up if their temperature is not working for them?
Absolutely, absolutely. This will give an advantage to where we can get in front of that type of thing. So obviously the desire is to address those calls before they happen. I would like to reiterate, this is a brand new digital system. We still have 20 and 50-year-old equipment out there. And regardless of how good the controls on something is, doesn't necessarily mean that the response is going to be appropriate for the desired outcome. Some things go all the way back to how a particular site was designed. Some things have to do with remodels that may have happened along the way, or just some failing infrastructure on things. So there's a significant amount of factors in play on that. But yes, absolutely. If things are out of what the designated set point temperatures are for areas, that's certainly something that we can do response for.
And then are our folks in our maintenance area, are they trained so they can do all of the things that need to be done, or are there certain situations where we have to call train and we have to use, when you were talking about that intelligence services agreement, I was just thinking, are our employees trained so they can help us out so we don't have to always reach out to train, or is that something that it's one or the other?
Yes and yes, in the sense that as part of the contract, there were also training hours that were part of that. We have had team members that have gone through training. There are various levels within the system, both for access as well as abilities, that have to be tailored for what the person's skill set is, what their responsibilities are. There will be aspects of this particular system to where vendor engagement is unavoidable, and that does fall definitely into the intelligence services aspect of it. This is no different from what we've had with previous controls companies, where you get to a certain point, and then when it gets into more advanced levels of configuration or programming, those are the people that do that all day long. That's what their specialty is. Those are the people driving Mercedes, so to speak. Any other questions?
I don't have any questions. I just wanted to say I'm aware of the heavy lift that this was, and I really appreciate it, and great presentation also. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, I do have 3 questions.
Yep.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
First, the virtual learning lab, when will that be completed? And is that something that we could go see once it's done?
I certainly hope. I certainly hope so. I'm sure Benny and I can probably make that happen quite easily.
Yes. So right now, we just received the documents, the 100% construction documents back. The next part is we're going to work with Greg Wilson and Jar Gerard from our BCT team. We're going to go over the equipment list, and we're expecting to be under construction of the lab in October with a driving completion for fall semester. So running a little behind schedule, but working to make up time.
Thank you. And then the McKinstry fee that we paid, is that a yearly fee, a one-time fee?
This was a one-time engagement for everything that they were doing with regard to the implementation of this project, getting everything checked, the one-year measurement and verification, as well as the warranty period. Now, would the college have need for continued engagement as measurement and verification continues on through the 15-year period? That's something that we could engage them with to do that outside of the current measures that have been taken.
And then the warranty, you said for 10 years, so does that expire in 2032?
Okay, so it's 10 years for lighting, and that's basically replacement like for like. So our teams would do the removal of that light. There's actually been a stock that's set up at our warehouse at our maintenance and security site at Valencian Country Club, so that all common use items, there's immediate replacements available too. So that exchange would happen. The light goes back in place so that we don't have areas dark for a prolonged period of time. That's performed by our teams. At that point, we then work with our warehouse team. They do a return merchandise authorization with Train. They then replenish that back stock. So we always have the latest and the greatest on that, so to speak. And at the time of the warranty period ending, we actually keep whatever back stock is available at that point as well. So there'll be sufficient attic stock going forward.
Thank you.
Certainly.
I have a couple of quick questions, David. First of all, great presentation, David.
Thank you.
Benny, and Dave. Much appreciated. The measurement and verification, is that something we can plan on each year? Or is that just once in a while? I just want to understand for the board the cadence of when they kind of get that update.
So that will be happening on an annual basis from Train for them to do evaluation and offer a report on that. They'll also be doing routine checks through the system. They'll schedule, okay, we're going to come in and look at X, or a lot of it can be done just through the system by their engineers. It's that intuitive of software. And then what will happen is if they should find factors to where, okay, it looks like there's something that requires attention, they can coordinate with the college at that point of, okay, what measures can be taken to adjust for any potential shortfalls, which is fairly unlikely, which is actually extremely unlikely, because in the course of repairing all of these items along the way, that's actually providing a greater potential for even greater savings, because you don't know what isn't working, you get it taken care of, and when they ran their original numbers, the presumption was that everything was operational. So all of this work that has taken place is going to equate to additional energy savings, and even things that had been adjusted within the contract for work that was part of construction or whatever. If Train couldn't guarantee the savings, it doesn't change the fact that we're still did do LED, we did 21st century equipment, and so that there will be savings on top of that as well. It just wouldn't be within the guarantee.
Sure. I'm just thinking, will we have for the board, each year at some point in time, okay, we've saved X amount, we've saved this amount, and so McKinstry would provide that at least, I guess, on a semi-annual basis for the board.
They would be doing that at the first official M&V at the 1-year period. McKinstry would be doing the validation of what Train did, and then if we engage them to continue on with that, that would certainly be an option.
Okay. Like the intelligent service agreement, is that an expense that's already accounted for in the scope that was presented earlier, or is that a separate expense in terms of that?
That would be outside of that. That would be more of an ongoing, and we're doing a 1-year trial, if you will, in the sense of we did some estimation of the type of hours based on the project that we're projecting for usage on that, with both the on-site, but primarily the on-site. And that's going to provide us an opportunity to see in the first year with regard to, okay, the levels that our teams are for staffing and still engaging in a new product, the familiarity that they have and whatnot. There will be support required, of course, and then that can be tailored going forward into, okay, now we're only going to need this amount, but we can do a 3-year engagement or a 5-year engagement to try and maximize the most value of doing a multi-year situation.
Okay, so, yeah, so do you have I just want the board to have a sense of the potential costs of an upcoming agreement in terms of the intelligence services. What can they expect?
Well, for this first year, It would be $235,000.
Good. And likewise, the virtual learning lab, same thing. Does the board need to anticipate additional costs coming to them to make that operational?
That would be, and that would just be for the software aspect, and that's going to be tied into the subscription that's being utilized on the operational side as well. So it's essentially different aspects of the same program that we're paying for.
Yeah, I just want to make sure as we leave these study sessions, you have a sense of what's coming your way in terms of approval. Thank you. Great presentation.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Just, Andrea, I don't know if you noted in the minutes, I'm not sure how obvious it is for everybody in the room, but Vice Chair Morales left the meeting for a conflict while Benny was presenting. I just wanted to make sure that was noted, that there are 4 board members in attendance now as opposed to 5. And with that, we could move on to 2.3, the bylaw review. Jeff, I believe you're up.
Is the red line up here too? Oh, he's got you. Well, that's the PDF, right? Okay. Got it. Yeah, there we go. There we go. Good. Awesome. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Evening. So I thought we'd just get a sense from the board for how you'd like to do this. So we set aside some time, excuse me, in case you have particular provisions you had questions about or wanted to look at. And then in anticipation of that, I shared just some preliminary thoughts on sections that I thought probably could use a little bit of clarification. It's just kind of based on experience over the last couple of years. So I'm happy to see if there's particular articles that board members have questions on, or I could bring up the version that that's what's up here now, that has the suggestions I had if you wanted to talk about those. So it's kind of whatever you think would be most productive. And then depending on how that goes, I thought we could talk about timing for if there are in fact provisions you want to change, and then what we could do for the timing for that for upcoming meetings.
Sounds good. So for me personally, I would say I'd love just sort of an overview of the changes you were suggesting, but I would love to hear from any of the other of my colleagues on the board if they have a preference.
Yeah, thanks. I'm just going to go ahead on Article 4. I think that should have been changed a long time ago, so thanks for putting that in there. Did you say Article 4? Yeah.
Oh, yeah, sure. Okay, yeah.
And then my next comment on the proposed changes that you put in there on, this is Article 6, meetings, and it was in Section 6. And so it was about the consent agenda. And the last line there, it said, the reason things are on the consent agenda, and it says, because they are items which are unlikely to generate controversy and are ministerial in nature. So I've heard that word before, but I wasn't 100% sure. I looked it up, and the 3 different dictionaries I looked it up, I would, based on one of the definitions, I would like to not use it. The first 2 were religious in nature. It said, ministry and being, following the head honcho in the church organization.
Which was not how that was intended, so.
Yeah, and then but the second one that caused me grief was ministerial function is one where the authority has a duty to do a particular thing in a particular way, act in a prescribed manner, and in obedience to a legal authority. All of that is fine with me, but then it says without regard to one's own judgment or discretion. And I was hoping maybe we could choose a different word that didn't mean that, because I think we always have to use our own judgment and our own discretion. managerial maybe, or, you know?
So maybe let's do this. I'll combine all the comments I've heard so far. So maybe I could run through if someone has a question about an article where I didn't suggest a change or has an idea about that, happy to talk about it. If not, I could just go to each of the ones where I had a suggestion, and then we'll get to Article 6, and if we have ideas for better language, then happy to talk about them, have the board talk about them, or just if it seems like a simple change, we can just, so we're not voting on this. This is just, and like I said, I just, based on feedback from different sources, just took a first stab at some things that I thought were fairly minor changes that would help clarify, at least in a couple things.
Sounds good.
So the first one, okay, so the first one, Article 4, the part where I suggested some changes was actually language that was added 3 years ago, 2.5, 3 years ago, when there's a prior revision. And my thinking was, when possible, I think the bylaws serve the board and the college best when the language is really simple and it's clear what a standard is. So, for example, it's hard to know, well, what does it mean to show a commitment to sort of future or continued compliance? Seemed like a difficult thing for someone to satisfy because it's really hard to know what that looks like. So it seemed like it was better just to take that out, and also because there are always going to be a number of factors that board members should think about when determining whether someone should be selected as an officer or not, and certainly how that person conducts themselves in office is a relevant factor. But there's lots of relevant factors the board should consider, and it just seemed like kind of leaving it open to that, and the discretion of the board seemed like a simpler, more comprehensive approach.
Plus, I believe it's not necessary because the board gets to vote anyway, and if we choose to change that, if we had left it in, we could change it. When I spoke with Chris Mays before she was elected, she reminded me that governing boards have in their right to also self-govern, and that's what those words mean, right? To self-govern, basically. Don't break the rules, and then you're not going to get elected to these positions of chair or vice chair if you're not following the rules. So I think it's just extraneous. We don't need it.
So that was kind of the thinking. Simpler seemed better. Okay, the next one. So Article 6 has different provisions about how meetings are arranged and conducted. One change I made is if you read the bylaws too literally, you can't change when you have your meetings once you've set the calendar. Well, that doesn't make sense, and of course there are very good reasons why the board needs to change meetings from time to time, so I just put in language to make it clear that you in fact have that discretion. I mean, you do, but if someone were to just read this strictly, you couldn't change the date of a regular meeting. And just to be clear, of course, at the January meeting, you set the schedule for the year. Sometimes it does already deviate up from that first approval from the second Wednesday of every month, like I said, which is fine as long as the majority of the board agrees. And then, of course, during the year, sometimes things come up and you have to change meetings anyway, just to make it very clear that you have the authority to do that. We need to pause any longer on that one? Okay. The next one, so the part of the language I took out was added the last time the board revised the bylaws, and the idea was that it was important. I think the thinking behind how that language got in there was that it was really important that board members know and have ample opportunity to communicate with the chair and have items put on upcoming agendas. The challenge with the way this was written is it does suggest that the board before every board meeting, has this serial conversation with all the board members. Now, a board, that could happen without violating the open meeting law, because if the only question the board chair and the board member had was, well, is there a topic you want on the upcoming board? Yes, it's topic X, and there was no more conversation after that, it would be fine. But if what happened was the board chair had a conversation with the board member, are there any topics you want on the board? Yes, topic X, and I think, and then the board chair had a conversation with the next board member about that conversation. Now we have an open meeting law problem. So it seems simpler not to have language in there that suggests that's what's happening on a monthly basis. It's not, but don't need to suggest that. And simply to reiterate that, of course, board members are always free to contact the chair and submit items for upcoming board meetings. So that was the reason for that. The second part, I borrowed the definition of consent agenda straight from the Attorney General Manual. There are certainly reasons why there might be better language to use. The concept is that, and maybe I said we can come up with different terminology. The concept of a consent agenda is it's items that are just very routine business of the college. They don't need significant discussion, right? So for example, if we already have a dual enrollment agreement with the school district and we want to renew it for another year, that's not typically something that needs a lot of discussion or debate, right? The board has already clearly signaled that it's interested and it's a goal of the college to have extensive dual enrollment agreements. We don't need a big debate about whether to issue an agreement for another year. So that's the idea. We could certainly, I'm happy to either take suggestions and I can have them for everyone to think about for the next board meeting or to suggest alternatives, but I thought it might be helpful to add something there to explain for the board members and the public what we mean by a consent agenda type item, and at least provide a little bit of explanation for what that is, because not everybody's familiar with that concept.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, go ahead.
When I read the definition, I think what you just said captures it better, because I don't have the words in front of me, but what was the word, controversial matters? I think that could be open for interpretation versus what you just said now, that it's more of a routine business, leaves it less subjective to what somebody might think.
So maybe for that one, if any particular board member has some language you think might be a good alternative, why don't you, if you don't mind, just email that to me. I'll come up with a couple alternatives also, and then we can talk about the timing for a meeting to actually vote on it, and then in advance, I can send each of you, here's whatever, 3 alternatives or 4 alternatives you could consider. So we're still in the meeting section, just kind of cleaning up again some sort of housekeeping issues here. This seems to suggest that the monthly reports and commentary you get from the board representatives are an action item. They're not. They're just information items. So I thought we could make that clear here. The other thing I thought would be helpful to do is clarify a practice that the board has had for quite a while, which is that when there's a contract that is the subject, or an agreement that's the subject of a board item, that document actually goes to the board. But also wanted to clarify that there are times when that has not been able to happen, and so the board would delegate authority to the chancellor to execute an agreement along the parameters of what's in the board report, because there have been times that because of the timing of board meetings and when work is supposed to start on an agreement or funding or some other circumstance, that we don't have a lot of control over, the finalization of the agreement and the regular board meeting cycle don't coincide very well. So this was an attempt to add some language to clarify that can happen from time to time.
Quick question on that, if I may. As you are well aware, there have been many times when I question that the contract wasn't in what we are voting on. And so it seems a little odd to say in that first part that, in the case of a contractor agreement, the proposed language of the contract shall also be included, and then just right after that it says, but the board may waive it, and then the next line says, well, it doesn't have to be there at all. And so, to me, that's a little chunky, that whole thing there. I don't think the board, at least the 2+ years that I've been on, we have never waived having a contract. It just wasn't there. It was done unto us instead of us waiving it ourselves. And so I want to clarify that, there's 3 different things in that paragraph, right? It's supposed to be there, the board can waive it, and then the third thing is it doesn't have to be there. And it just seems like it's a little inconsistent.
So the board could decide you don't ever want to do that, and there has to be a final agreement. That's an option. Or I could come up with a way to say that's maybe a little more streamlined, if that's okay. Or you could even make it really simple and say it's on there unless the board, the effect of if the board approves it and it's not there, right, that's the board is waiving it. Presumably we need to do that all as part of the same meeting. Otherwise, we already have a situation where timing is a problem, and now we're going to make the timing issue even bigger. Another way around this situation is the board could decide the practice is we do want the final agreement, and we'll just have a special meeting off schedule if we need to, so that we could approve something in a timely way and have the benefit of the final document. So there's different ways to address that situation, entirely up to the preference of the board, or I could just draft this to give you the maximum flexibility. We could tweak this to just give the board the maximum flexibility, and then you all make the decision depending on the particular circumstances.
This is possibly a suggestion for a policy or a practice that we have at the college, but I think it would be beneficial for the board members to know when the contract isn't there. Because, oftentimes I've spent a lot of time reading through the contract, and then I get to the very end of the contract and I find out it's a contract between TUSD and the group that we're going to be working with, right? So it isn't even necessarily our contract. So, and I just made those 2 entities up. It might have been something that other groups. So we should know if it's not a contract that's either been developed between us and whoever we're engaging in this contract with, or that it's not there at all. Because I think when we vote on things, if it's there, we're voting for a different reason. If it's not there, we're just voting basically a dollar amount that is, a suggestion what it's going to cost. And then the second thing is when the contracts are enacted, if it hadn't been enacted before when we vote on it, that's also something that maybe the board should be informed of.
So it sounds like some of that could be addressed in our practices on board reports, right? So we could have some kind of header or labeling up front at the beginning of the board report if the contract's not attached, so that it really calls attention to that and then explains here's why and here's what we're asking and what the parameters are, so at least you're not approving a complete blank check. In other words, that here's the parameters that the agreement will align with. But we could do that through the board report process as opposed to through a bylaw change. Or it could, depends how strongly the board feels about it. It could be in the bylaws too. Food for thought. And like I said, I'm also happy to come up with a couple different versions of this and share it with all of you in advance of a board meeting, and then you could decide and discuss further which way you'd like to go. Okay, so I think we're in Article 10. It's Code of Ethics. I think this is this last section where I had some thoughts. Yeah. So, Section 5, the headings procedural responsibilities, it kind of has broad brushstrokes about some processes that the board follows. In the original language, it just talks about employees, but in fact, of course, there are complaint processes for employees, students, and members of the community, but that was not addressed here at all. So I thought, just to be consistent, let's talk about all of those groups, because any one of them might be a group that, or an individual from one of those groups that's coming forward to the board with a concern. And it also kind of seemed like there were two, they're related, but they're different concepts that were all covered in one paragraph, so I just split them into two to make it, again, just going for simplicity.
That makes sense to me. Thanks, Jeff.
And I think that was the last one. I said I wasn't, I just tried to pick areas that I thought seemed to be, could use some clarification that were pretty simple.
I appreciate it. Are there any other comments or feedback from the board for Jeff? If not, we can look at some of those revisions at an upcoming meeting and drill down and get the new reviewed version passed.
Mr. Chair, I just have one question.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going through the bylaws. It said that at the direction of the chair, the board conducts a annual self-evaluation. So my first question is, has the board done that? And then if so, is that done like an executive session? Is that something that is released to the public? How does that process work?
So the board has done a self-assessment each year. We're in the process of planning for this year's cycle. It's usually been done, we're probably looking at June, later toward the end of the fiscal year. In the most of the years that I can think of, we have worked with an outside National Community College Association. They have some standard questions that they use. They've been adjusted so that they reflect the particular goals at Pima College. So that they're tailored toward two, if I can put them in two big buckets. The college, whether the board has sort of accomplished the work that it identified for itself in the prior year. So each year the board has set goals for itself. So the assessment looks at how did the board do in progress on those goals. And then it also looks at sort of how well the board is functioning. Each year, board members have filled out those surveys separately, right? Not each individual board member has done it separately, not on their own link. It goes then compiled so that what you get is the compilation of all of that information. And it's set up in such a way that board members can make anonymous comments, so board members can feel free to share whatever they want to in that particular document. There's a conversation in executive session. Ultimately, the board does have a public discussion and publishes a version of the assessment that goes on the web, so that everyone can see. But it's not individualized, right? What gets published on the web is a compiled, consolidated version that the board approves. It doesn't necessarily have everything in there that board members talked about. It's really the version gets published on the web captures what the board has identified as the most important themes coming out of their collective comments, because it is supposed to be reflective of the board's self-assessment, not what each individual member thinks. So we kind of go through a process to collect whatever the top most themes are, and then that's what gets published. And then that feeds the dialogue among the board members of, well, what should we work on collectively for next year? Whether it's a particular task, whether it's a type of professional development, whatever areas the board might have identified as either priorities for the upcoming year, or because of the assessment, oh, these are areas where we think we could do better.
Thank you.
Also, I think worth noting is, we're still finalizing the agenda for the board retreat in the beginning of June, but one of the agenda items is to look at the results of that survey. So we need to do our parts in terms of the self-evaluation prior to that. And then I think my hope is we can then take those results once we understand them and feed it into those discussions about goals and how we can effectively work together going forward and all of that. So, and that is a public meeting. So, they'll be presented in that format, if that helps answer your question.
So a logistical, I guess one question, was there anything else, Chancellor, that you wanted to add about the board assessment process?
No, I think Greg covered it. So we're going to do.
Just a logistical note. So in the bylaws, the board can revise the bylaws. The board has to give notice of its intent to do that at an upcoming board meeting, and then explains when that's going to happen. So a question is, do you want me, we can add to the May, so we have the next regular board meeting is May 14th. We could put the notice in that agenda, if you're interested in that timing, and then you could decide. We could either do revisions at an upcoming study session or at the June meeting.
And Jeff, I think, speaking of the retreat, I think we also had on the retreat agenda and one of the days to go through it. We may not have that much we have to go through, but if we noticed it in May, would we vote on it? I'm just trying to figure out the order. Would we still need it in the retreat, or we take it out of the retreat and then we just sort of notice it in May and vote on it in June?
If you wanted to cover the bylaws and vote during the retreat, we could do that. Then I would just do the notice at the May meeting. In other words, at a prior regular meeting, the board has to give notice of its intent to revise the bylaws. So if you think you'd like to do it in June, at whichever meeting in June, the retreat certainly would be a time where you would have an opportunity to discuss and then vote. We could certainly do it that way, and then I just add a notice to the May board meeting agenda, the regular May board meeting agenda.
That works for me if my colleagues on the board concur with that.
Okay, seems like that works for everybody. Okay, thank you. Any other questions about the bylaws?
Nope. All right, I'm not hearing any, and that brings us to the end of our agenda. So I think we're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.